All right, I wanted to go over this final play of the Cowboys versus 49ers game because everybody was making fun of it, and the play did look pretty dumb in real time, but I think what the Cowboys were going for was actually kind of smart. What they were trying to do, at least. They didn't execute it very well, though. Obviously, everybody made fun of the idea that Ezekiel Elliott was at center and snapped the ball, but I think when we look at the game situation, they were on like the 24-yard line, right? So they had to go 76 yards to score a touchdown in one play. The odds of this happening are pretty much zero. We've seen it happen really once in the past few years. It wasn't exactly this long, but we saw the Miami Miracle, the Dolphins versus the Patriots back when Kenyon Drake ran it in. Now, a large part why the Miami Miracle play worked was because Kenyon Drake just had a really good run, and partly because there weren't that many laterals in that play. When you have these long plays where you need laterals to score, it actually helps the lower amount of laterals that you have, especially if you have linemen on the field. Because once you start lateraling backwards too much, you end up losing ground. You're just going towards your own end zone, and you're not really getting that forward momentum that keeps the defense and their angles changing. That's the whole point. You want them to be changing angles across the field. Now, when Miami did it, they only lateraled a few times, and they got Gronkowski as the last guy that had to get the right angle. But on this play, the Cowboys won. I think it's smart in a way because I think they had too many linemen, and I think that's the first main issue. They had too many linemen on this play. Obviously, it's a huge long shot that this even works, but this play became kind of a joke because they just threw a slant to Turpin immediately and he gets tackled. Like, he gets blown up. So I think that's the first problem. You have too many linemen, and you spread them out too much. And the reason I say that is because you spread these linemen completely out, and then you just threw a slant in front of the linemen. So you didn't really change how the play was going to work. This probably would have looked the exact same if you just had the linemen in anyway. If you're going to have them out there, at least throw it to where Turpin is behind these linemen. And when they're spread out across the field and you throw it to him, behind the linemen, he would have blockers. And then you could have Zeke maybe loop around behind him and you have someone to lateral to. But instead they had Zeke try to block a linebacker, which he just immediately got plowed over because he had no momentum. And then you just threw the ball on a slant in front of your linemen that you had spread out. So I think it kind of defeated the purpose of what, in theory, would be good about this. But if I was designing the play personally, I would have way less linemen. I would pretty much just have skill players across the entire field because the whole point is that if you're lateraling the ball a lot, you don't really want linemen to get the ball. They'd never touch the ball on a normal play. They're really not supposed to do that. They're the slowest guys on the field. You can have tight ends or receivers blocking because most of the guys they're blocking are going to be linebackers and then a ton of DBs. As you can see on the Cowboys play here, there weren't any defensive linemen, and that's why I think this is smart. A 12-yard sack is the exact same outcome as a 50-yard gain for the offense. As long as they don't get in the end zone and there aren't any penalties, the defense has done their job. So I think that's why you want less linemen, because their job here is pretty much irrelevant. They don't need to block for the quarterback. They just need to get out of the way for the ball carriers. So you would rather just have a tight end there or some receiver. If it was me, I'm putting skill positions as every lineman. And you don't have to spread them out like this, but you can, because once the forward pass is made or once the line of scrimmage is passed, those guys that are linemen, they have literally no role in the play. Their role is the exact same as every other player, which is just they're a person to lateral to. So if you think about it just from a numbers breakdown, if the defense is coming out and they have 8 DBs out there and then 3 linebackers, right? You don't need 5 linemen. You don't even need really 1 lineman. What you could do is you could just put all of your backup receivers, whoever your fastest players are, even if they're DBs, punt returners, whatever. That's why they had Turpin out there, I think, for the Cowboys, because, he's good at running with the ball. Just whoever you can get out there. And then what I would do is I'd just say all these guys are able to be lateral to, so let's just see what happens, right? If all of my guys can run and be lateral to, I have that. I've set the numbers equal. I think the defense has the numbers advantage when they have no linemen on the field, and then you have 4 or 5 linemen on the field, which can't do anything. So then you basically have 11 guys on the defense that can all swarm to the ball and tackle, and then you only have 5 or 6, if your quarterback's good at running, guys on offense who can actually run with the ball and evade those guys. So you're down 5 players pretty much when you have that full offensive line. So I think it was a smart idea. I think it was executed really poorly. Zeke should not be blocking. He should be snapping and immediately getting out of there. Obviously, he couldn't go more than 2 yards downfield until the pass is thrown, but it was a quick pass anyway. I think I would just run a quick pass, maybe spread it out with some tight ends to block for Turpin, but it'd almost just be like a screen pass, and then we just kind of run up field, see what happens, lateral a couple times, and maybe something crazy. A defensive penalty obviously extends the game. If any player on defense takes off his helmet during the play, we've seen that happen, does a face mask tackle, or just horse collar, anything, right? It would extend the game by 1 play, and I think that's what you're trying to have happen with a play like this, is just something fluky. We've seen it in college with kick return touchdowns, and I think the reason why it's worked is because you don't really have linemen on a kickoff return. So a lot of those guys can run with the ball. They're special teams players, defensive backs, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, whatever. A lot of those guys are normal ball carriers. But it also works because, in the Miami versus Duke play in college, there was just some missed calls by referees. But also there were a lot of laterals, and they got the defense or the kick coverage to get tired, and they just outran them, outblocked them in the end. They just kept shifting back and forth across the field, changing those pursuit angles. Obviously in the pros this would be more difficult because everybody can tackle. For the most part, that's going to be on the field there, and they're just better players, so they're missed tackles. You're not exactly going to have Marshawn Lynch, like a beast mode type play where you're just breaking every tackle. You have to get past some guys, and I think that's why when Zeke was center here, if you have Zeke just run away instead of blocking, you had 2 guys running at Dak Prescott, so you immediately had a numbers advantage. If you had skill players and no linemen, like I'd said, because once that pass is completed to an eligible receiver, all of those guys become the same. They're just guys to lateral to. I think if you had those 2 guys coming at Dak Prescott, and then he throws the ball, now you actually have a numbers advantage. You actually have more players downfield than the defense does, and if you have a guy running with the ball who's pretty good and he can follow some of those faster blockers like tight ends and receivers, all they have to do is just get in the way. They don't have to pancake these guys. I think you actually have a chance on a play like this. And if Zeke's running in behind and he's able to be pitched to, and then he can pitch it back to your other skill players, I think it's actually a smart play, and I think more teams in any level of football should do this. Sub out your linemen if you need a crazy play like this where you're lateraling, because you don't want those guys holding the ball anyway, and you don't need big guys because the defense doesn't have any big guys. But yeah, anyway, saw this play getting memed on a lot. A lot of people were joking about this play, how it was terrible. It was terrible, but the idea is good. The execution was poor. I think the idea is really good. So, yeah, just wanted to talk about that.